I think people are always going to crash in pro cycling. I think prevention is going to come from, from awareness from one, and then from helmet manufacturers creating helmets that, can protect in a better way. And the reality is that cycling is a dangerous sport, and people have always crashed and will kind of always continue to crash.
That was the voice of Ian Boswell, a good friend of mine and also ex-World Tour rider. Ian competed for teams such as Sky and Katusha. He participated in some of the sport's biggest races such as the Tour de France, the Giro and the Vuelta a España. But perhaps his biggest challenge came during the 2019 Tirreno-Adriatico when he crashed heavily, exiting the race. Boswell suffered some pretty bad injuries and as a result had quite a severe head trauma. Cycling isn't a contact sport like boxing or rugby, and because of this, it doesn't have the same standardised procedures and regulations put in place to deal with a head trauma when it does arise.
For example, if you look at American sports, there's baseline testing before pre-season, and if an athlete is, potentially had suffered a concussion in competition, they can be pulled off the field, they can go to the locker room, they can do testing, and if they pass a baseline test or a series of, cognitive tests and balance tests, then an athlete can say, hey, listen, I've passed the test, can you put me back in the game? But in cycling, there's no sideline, there's no timeouts, there's no halftime. You can't do it. It's really difficult to actually diagnose a concussion, during an event. The difficulty is there's no way to check an athlete in the middle of a race to see a concussion. Unfortunately, the only way to know someone's had a concussion in cycling is they've been unconscious or they're acting, far different than their normal characteristics.
There are a greater number of riders coming forward with their own experiences of concussion and the dangers that it can pose. We've all heard what a big impact to the head can cause, but what about the pitfalls of a mismanaged recovery and the dangers of smaller knocks to the head? We thought we'd delve deeper. So, we are really grateful to be joined by Jack Hardwick of the University of Winchester, who's currently researching concussion in competitive cycling for his PhD. Jack, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, happy to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you and get an expert opinion on the topic. Jack, if you want to explain firstly what a concussion actually is.
Yeah, so concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury, so it concerns the shaping of the brain within the skull. So there's mainly a kind of acceleration, deceleration of the brain that hits against the skull in different directions. So that can be linear or rotational. And this kind of causes a cascade of events within the brain that can be seen through different physical symptoms, as well as now we're understanding the kind of long-term implications on cognitive function and behavioural things. So things like that, it's kind of a multitude of different symptoms that we see.
So what would be the symptoms you'd associate with a concussion immediately after an incident?
Okay, yeah, so immediately there's a range of different symptoms that you can have. So in the short term, it can be feeling sort of sick, nausea, confusion immediately after it happened. People often report kind of feeling the fog as a symptom, not be quite sure where they are or what they're doing or what happened. That's one of the biggest ones they might not have known. Say in cycling, just crashed, they might be like sort of a bit dazed and confused. Sort of you could see it in their eyes, kind of glazing over their eyes. So that's in the short term.
And could you not feel any symptoms in the short term after a crash? Could you feel kind of normal and then maybe these symptoms emerge later on, a few days later or something like this?
Yeah, so this is one of the big ones that makes it a particular issue in sport, is you can be not symptomatic. The nature of the injury is it's a compound injury, and it sort of sets off a reaction in the brain once it's happened, which can then unfold over a certain amount of time, which is different for each individual because everyone's brain is different, every impact is different, and that's why it's really important to take precaution. Whatever impact you have, even if you're not showing symptoms, they can come around afterwards.
So Jack, why did you start researching concussion? What got you into this area in the first place?
So I've got personal experience with the injury myself. So I used to race. I won't say anything about that because I wasn't at a high level at all, but I had a lot of crashes throughout that time. Most recent crash was a couple of years ago. I broke my jaw on both sides, my elbow and my hip, and suffered a severe concussion. At the time, I was treated for the jaw and everything. I was taken to the hospital. at no point throughout the procedure I was told that I suffered a concussion. So not knowing about it, I just was straight back to training as quick as I could. I was back on the indoor trainer quite quickly, and I was back racing a lot sooner than I should have been. Following kind of a year onwards, and still now I have some of the effects of it, I was having symptoms that were coming back. I was having kind of behavioural changes, but at the time I knew nothing about it. And me, at low level of the sport, was still subscribing to this. I need to get back to race, I need to get back. And I didn't take it seriously because I didn't know. Looking back now, if I knew what I did, absolutely would have taken it seriously, a lot more time off the bike, and I would have sought a specialist to say, this is what happened. So it was useful for me going through it because I can see as well, when I was coming back to the race, there was no stopping me. There was no one when I went to the race saying, didn't you have that massive crash a month ago or something? What are you doing back here? You need to take yourself out. It was, I can't believe you're back. Like, you're hard as nails. Like, well done, mate. Doctors, obviously I didn't report to the doctors I had concussions. I wasn't told and I didn't know about it. So the only real prevention for me getting back into racing was my mum, who was obviously concerned and didn't want me to. But that was quite easy to get around through just sneaking out and going to the races. So yeah, through my own experiences, I've seen a lot of things that need addressing, mainly the awareness and knowledge around it, but also the kind of accountability and maybe the prevention of athletes coming back to races so quickly.
Today, Ian Boswell of Team Katusha probably the worst off, and he'll be kept in overnight in hospital for observation.
I'm Ian Boswell. I'm an American cyclist. I was a professional road cyclist in the World Tour for 7 years, and following a crash in March of last year at Tirreno-Adriatico, where I suffered a concussion, I've decided to walk away from professional road cycling and making a bit of a transition into some gravel racing and events that I kind of deem less dangerous, just because of my past history with concussion. So I'm happy to be here and kind of share my story and pass along any advice and knowledge that I've gained through my recovery process. I know from how I broke my helmet and just like how I was laying on the ground, somehow gone over the front of my handlebars on a downhill. I don't know if my front wheel was taken out or whatnot, and landed on the back of my head and was unconscious for anywhere from like 60 to 90 seconds until I guess my team director in the car had come to me and the ambulance had stopped as well. But that whole time and, kind of surrounding the crash, I don't remember because, I was unconscious. The first thing I remember was like being loaded into an ambulance, and I was pretty adamant to try and get back on my bike. But thankfully the people and the medical staff were like, no, you're not going to get back on your bike. Yeah, so in the week following the crash, I went back to Nice, and the team doctor advised me to take 8 days off the bike, which is a pretty standard practice from any sports team. Like, that's kind of the minimum recovery time that any, sports trainer would recommend, whether it be, football, rugby. And I think that timeline is kind of in place also because that's usually the window between games. Like, for example, in the NFL, it's like you have a game on Sunday, then a game the next Sunday. So it's convenient to have essentially a week's rest so you could potentially play next week. Yeah. I experienced a lot of, I just really didn't feel like myself. I felt extremely fatigued. I was, had memory issues, and kind of as the time went on, like more emotional issues started to come up. I was never severely depressed, but definitely was, experienced some emotional low points. And then, I had pretty bad headaches that really extended, 7 or 8 months post concussion. And, so I tried to keep a journal and tried to document what would kind of set these headaches off. And oftentimes it was just increased, stimulation, whether I was, trying to ride my bike more or spending more time on my computer or, phone or reading. And then also I had double vision pretty severely that, kind of came from issues when I hit my head. It kind of altered my eyesight and changed some things in my vision that I'm still dealing with today. And, do therapy to try and kind of correct that and bring it back to normal. But it was, for some reason, brought up and brought on by the concussion.
So, how do you think cycling needs to address the issue of concussion?
So cycling's obviously got its very unique challenges. It's not like other sports. So we saw with Ian Boswell, he talks a lot on the subject. Like we see with field sports in the NFL and with rugby, there's a capability to take players off and have substitutes, or you can stop the game for medical assessments. That's not the case in cycling. If you have a crash, you're taken out of the race, you can't be assessed and get back in because the race is gone. So cycling faces its own challenges, and that's why we need specific policy for cycling, informed by experts within the field. One thing that we could do is have a centralised concussion management system, something I know that Boswell is working on as well. So every rider has a cognitive baseline test at the start of the season. So every time they have a crash, whether it's in training or competition, whoever's managing the health of the riders within that team can then test the rider against the baseline of when they were in a healthy condition, and this kind of gives a picture of their cognitive function over time, and it's also appreciating the history of concussion. So when you have one concussion, this will show up on the data, and they can say, okay, you had a crash a couple of months ago, you had it again, and you can see the results on the baseline test, and that can then inform, okay, maybe you should pull out of this race, you're going to take this time to recover.
And obviously not all of us are professional riders. Most of us are just riding for fun, we're riding at the weekend, we're getting involved in amateur racing. How would you advise everyone to kind of better protect their health in terms of a concussion or potential concussion?
Yeah, so for me, I think the answer lies in education and having a lot of resources out there and raising the awareness. As we see with Ian Boswell's doing a lot of work now out of his own experiences of raising awareness and trying to produce these resources, so then athletes are empowered and they have the knowledge to kind of take the injury upon themselves. So all the policy ideas we talked about are great, and it would be good to have them in, but that's the very high elite level of the sport and professionals. Obviously everyone rides bikes, and cycling is great because it's accessible. Everyone can race, and there's such a wide range of different athletes, as well as recreational riders. So for me, the answer is raising awareness, having more resources out there.
I think as well, when I was racing when I first started, if I was involved in a crash, definitely the thing that was ingrained in me was just to like get up off the road, get back on my bike, just keep on going.
Absolutely.
And if I didn't do this, it was almost like I'd failed, and I'd almost be kind of, it was like I wasn't a good rider because I was letting a crash affect me. And I think this is something I've come across, I'm not sure if you feel the same, that we need to kind of educate people that if they are involved in a crash, they need to kind of take themselves away from competition.
From an athlete level, yeah, when you crash, there's so much on the line, and especially with professional athletes, it's your life. So you feel pressured to carry on the competitions. But the danger here as well, we're seeing that reflect all the way through the sport. Stories like Ian Boswell coming forward is really good when we're seeing people at that level of the sport come forward saying, look, this is a serious injury. I'm a living experience of what can happen if it's mismanaged. And then when that's becoming more of a conversation, we're going to see more athletes saying when a guy pulls himself out of a race or decides not to race, because of his own knowledge of the risks, that's met with a lot more of a positive attitude, rather than what we're seeing where you kind of, one, the athlete feels like he has to carry on racing, kind of subscribing to the sporting glory side of it, and two, not facing pressures from other riders or coaches or teams that if they don't continue, that's going to be kind of a detriment to anything. The health should come first, really, is the main point.
Seconds.
Over one too many risks.
This is, I think, the corner where we saw the wheel skip. Oh, he's caught the barriers. Yes, corner, and he's being attended to by the medics. The good news here in the Tour de France, they have parap in this tour.
Yeah, I mean, had I been 21 years old and, you know, my first year as a world tour rider, and I had this crash and I didn't have a wife and, you know, someone to kind of really remind me of the long-term, you know, health of myself, you know, I probably would have returned without thinking twice. You know, in other crashes that I've had where I've been concussed, you know, I did return because that was all that was important to me. I didn't have any foresight into the future of my life and that long-term health, and the awareness around concussion was much less as well.
So what sort of advice would you give to someone who's been involved in a crash, out training or in an amateur race? What would you say to them in that specific moment?
So straight away, come out of the situation. You want to reduce the risk of hitting your head again as much as possible. So if it's in a competition, pull out. If you're training, ideally go to a cafe nearby or anything and text a friend or family if they can come pick you up. Following that, main thing, seek medical advice. But you want a period of rest, so 24 hours, 48 hours, physical rest and cognitive rest, so that's staying away from screens, phones as much as possible. And then what we're seeing increasingly more now, so that it used to be you'd go to the doctors and say, right, concussion, rest, nothing for however long, weeks. So now we're seeing it's a gradual reintroduction, so you have that period of rest, and then you've got to treat the injury. It's a brain injury, so you need to appreciate that. So if you're young and you're in school or you're working, gradually reintroduce yourself into that. So I'd say if it's a child in school, you want them to have at least a couple of days off school so they're not having that cognitive stress. In terms of the physical side, again, it's this gradual reintroduction. So it's not laying in a dark room away from anything. It's kind of going for walks, maybe listening to podcasts, so it's lightly stimulating. I know that's something that Ian Boswell used in his recovery. So it's light stimulation, also just keeping active. And in terms of cycling, once again, I want to stress, go to a medical professional. Especially if you're still being symptomatic, but even if you're not, seek medical advice, follow what they say, and then it's a gradual reintroduction to sport. Don't feel pressured, don't try to get straight back into it. Fitness comes and goes, but you've got one brain, so you want to look after it.
While we're here talking about kind of my incident and our former life as pro cyclists, there are an incredible amount of weekend warriors and amateur cyclists who are out there who also experience crashes, and they might not have access to information like that. So just trying to give a broader, network of athletes, access to this information to say, hey, listen, I've hit my head. I heard that, Ian or, Eddie or, this was their plan of action for recovery, to make that accessible to everyone who, rides a bike, and whether that's something that, can be incorporated into a British cycling license or an American cycling license, just sort of the information of, sharing of information is extremely helpful.
I would advise looking through, I know we've talked about the Concussion Legacy Foundation, really good organisation based in the USA. That's formed out of the NFL, but they're applicable across sports, anything to do with head trauma in sports. Really informative website, a lot of resources there. There's also Headway, they're international, they're very big in the UK. They have clinics, same with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, they have specific clinics for brain injury. So if you are suffering the long-term implications, or you've just had one crash or one hit to the head and you want help, go to the specific clinics to get advice on that.
Once concussion symptoms have stopped, don't rush back into training straight away, and try to use these steps as a guide to your return. Remember to always do this with the help of a medical professional. These steps have been taken from the Zurich Concussion Protocol. Number 1, no activity. Complete physical and cognitive rest until symptom-free. Number 2, stationary riding at a heart rate 70% below your max. Short duration exercise and not on the rollers, as full coordination of the cyclist may not have yet returned. Number 3, solo riding on a road, track or trail at low intensity and short duration. Number 4, solo riding on a road, track or trail incorporating intervals and/or hill workouts at higher levels of intensity and duration. Number 5, group rides with sprints and/or climbs. Number 6, return to competition. It's important to remember that if any symptoms return during the steps of the protocol, to stop training and rest once more. Take 24 hours before you resume training and activity once again. Take each step gently and don't rush through them. It's important to remember that if any symptoms do return and are hard to shift, to really seek the help of a medical professional to aid you with your recovery.
Another thing I would allude to is, kind of this recovery window after a concussion. When I spoke with specialists, there's not really a way to identify when your brain is fully healed. Their kind of, consensus was if I was playing in any American sport, I'd be medically suspended for the rest of the year. The governing body wouldn't allow me to race just because the symptoms I had and the potential damage if I returned and had another incident. And at the moment, there's no formal kind of protocol in pro cycling. People return to racing when they choose or when the team deems them ready to race again. For example, myself this year, I was on a contract year, so the desire to get back to racing was, pretty, it was a must in order for me to find a new contract. But health-wise and looking at your long-term health, I am really glad that I didn't return to racing this year if another crash did take place.
Concussion protocols have been in the news a lot recently. The UCI have promised reforms, but in our opinion, more needs to be done to safeguard those racing and also everyday riders. We found the UCI's guidelines and protocols on concussion quite vague. We think some serious rules need to be established in order to determine when a rider should A, return to competition, and also should they be made to stop racing during a competition.
One of the things I'm looking at doing with, this North American Riders Union is actually putting together a few kind of like certified centers of excellence, like really globally. So if you're an American rider living in Spain or Belgium or France, if you have a concussion, where can you go to be seen by a team of doctors to be evaluated and to kind of give you the best plan of recovery? Which isn't easy, but because they're different hospitals have theories, but at least having some sort of network of clinics set up where people can go to get the treatment they need, rather than in my case, I was very much kind of left to my own devices, trying to figure out where to go and who to see.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like an amazing idea, actually, because I remember when I was a rider, the concussion education was coming in a bit and you were aware of it, but I just remember thinking, if I get a concussion, where am I going to start to even try to get this specialist help? And it was always, like you said, like almost like word of mouth, people messaging you to say you should go here or there.
One thing that I noticed after my crashes, I wasn't, I've had multiple concussions over my career from racing, but I never really knew what the side effects or what those kind of symptoms, those immediate symptoms were. And so just general awareness of riders knowing what they should be looking for, could be a big step forward to riders, kind of self-diagnosing a concussion after a crash. My recovery plan, when I came back to the US, I started seeing like a vestibular therapist and a neurologist down at Dartmouth Hitchcock. And, I was still almost like traumatized to ride my bike, especially just because there's so much stimulation. My balance was off, my vision was off. So the thought of like riding a bike at speed was like terrifying. So they actually recommended me, just going for walks to get that sensation of moving under me. And then I started doing a little bit of jogging before I started, riding my fat bike, because it's bigger tires, there's, more, contact with the ground, the speeds are slower. And from there I kind of gradually progressed to riding my road bike again. I would rather ride my bike or be able to ride my bike for the rest of my life than to race for another, 2 or 5 or 10 years. The importance of me of riding my bike far exceeds, the importance of winning a race and being a World Tour rider.
Interesting how Boswell's experiences of concussion really just seem like a grapple in the dark of how to get himself back to health. With limited resources, Boswell really seemed to rely on his own autonomy to seek the experts and the correct advice to return to the sport that he loved. It seems that so much research is coming out in recent years about the dangers of concussion, and we really do need to be aware of what the impact a head injury or a minor head injury might have on our health. I think the key thing to emerge from this is the need for education and awareness of the dangers of concussion. It seems like the sport is really moving forward in allowing people to understand what the impact of a concussion will have on their health and their bodies. Now, I hope you found this film useful, and if you did, please give it a like. If you've suffered from a concussion or know someone who has, please share your experiences in the comment section below so as to educate other people. Now remember not to let this dampen your experiences of riding. Keep riding, stay safe, and enjoy your time on the bike.